Hi, everyone. And on today's podcast, we have a really interesting guest today, which is Simon. So, Simon, how about this? We can first start with an introduction and we'll dive into the deep discussion that we're going to have today.
Yeah, that sounds great. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be able to join this podcast today. And I got invited by Sumit. So thank you so much for the invitation. And I'm excited for this conversation.
Okay. So, I would love to hear a bit more about you.
Yeah, basically, I'm Simon. I'm from Germany. And I think, as probably most of us, I had quite an eventful upbringing. And especially after I turned 18 and after I was able to make my own decisions, choose my own career, and develop from there, many things happened. So just to give a rough overview, for example, like I built 2 companies already. I'm on my 3rd right now. I got married and divorced within a year, and just generally I moved around, and like so many things happened to me. And I was trying to figure out, okay, how can I deal with all of that? Because it's quite overwhelming, or it was quite overwhelming to me personally. And I can imagine that for many of you out there, it might be as overwhelming, or maybe even more, maybe less, like we all experience those challenges differently. And so now I started putting all my thoughts and all my practices and everything I've done in the last 5 years onto paper. And now I want to put it out there to help as many people as possible to navigate those challenges and to develop as good as possible to become the person that they are meant to be.
Okay. So, essentially, you've created a mental model that can help anyone improve. Is there any specific skill that they can improve in with this mental model, or is it universal? What does that look like?
So I do think that generally those mental models, and I do believe that in many different cases, like not just my mental model, but generally if you learn something new that you can apply to so many different ways, you just have to think about the options that you have and think about be a little bit creative, So yeah, I do think my model can help in many different ways. So for now, I think it's good for career. It's generally good to how to integrate into like a community or like your social group that you're in. It helps you with dealing with yourself and reflecting on yourself and changing your own behavior. So I do think that there are many different ways to apply this model, yeah.
Okay, then let's just dive into this. I'm really excited to learn from you.
So for me, everything basically in the last 5 years was evolving around perspective. So whenever I felt like I was stuck, or I didn't know where to go, or I felt overwhelmed and I felt like I couldn't do anything anymore, then the realization at some point came that I was just not having the right perspective on things. And either by learning something new or seeing it from like a different viewpoint, there are so many different ways how you can get a new perspective and how you can view your own situation in a different light that helps you move on. So that's why the perspective part is so important to me. And
so essentially exploring a more positive perspective to things?
yeah, positive would be the best case, right? But I also think we have to be realistic that not all things are positive, like when you just got broken up with or when you lost your job or something, this is not a positive thing, right? And you don't have to glorify that thing. Right? You don't have to be like, oh my God, it's so good that my partner left me because now I can be myself, or like now I can find the person that is really good for me. But you will not know that the next time you go dating, right? So you don't need to glorify what happened in the past or like what happened to you. But I think it helps to see different options that you have that you were not aware of in the moment that you're overwhelmed.
Wow, that makes sense. I really like the idea of not trivializing your problems, because essentially what a lot of people will say is, oh, it happened, big deal, move on and like get over it. But I think that your perspective on this is pretty interesting. So let's dive into this. There's this beautiful, there's a lot of information that I want to learn from this.
Exactly. So you see on the Pentagon, on the top, there's the present. And I think this is the most important part, because no matter whether we are talking about today or tomorrow or yesterday, in the moment, it's always the present. So even if you make a decision what you're going to have for breakfast tomorrow, then when you're sitting at breakfast tomorrow, it's your present. So you will always have to deal with your present, and in every step, the present is there because that is when action actually happens. The planning is nice, the reflecting is nice, but when you do the things is in the present. So I think this is the most crucial part of your journey, that you're always aware what happens in the present, right?
Okay.
And obviously time-wise, the big three are past, present, and future. And when we think about it, what does connect those 3 points, right? And that was my quest, basically, to figure out, okay, things happened to me in the past, I'm living in the present right now, and I have a vision for myself that I want to reach. And how do I get from the past to the present to the future? And basically the 2 points that I found were the most important are clarity about your past and the curiosity and the courage to get to your future.
Okay.
So how do you get to clarity? Like, I mean, clarity is such a big word, it's so meta, it's so philosophical. And I do think there are 2 important parts to it, right? You look at your past and you have to understand it. So let's stay with the relationship example. If you leave someone or you got left by someone, you can look at what happened. And to be honest, you won't get satisfying answers by the other person. I think when it comes, like when a relationship breaks, it could be romantic, it could be friendship, it could be work related, right?
Yeah.
Honesty would be an important part, but I don't think that most people are honest within the breakup, you know? Like they will pretend to have some arguments, but it might not lead you to the clarity that you're seeking. So you have to focus on yourself, you have to look at yourself and be like, what did I do that was not serving the relationship? Maybe also like, why was this relationship not good for me? And it's okay that it stopped existing, you know? So like where you get from to see the good perspective, that would be optimal, but it doesn't have to be. And so if you evaluate, if you ask critically, and if you are ruthless with yourself, you know, like we have to be ruthless with ourselves. We have to be very honest and direct with ourselves, because it doesn't help us to sugarcoat it, because it will just stretch the perspective into something that is not actually real. And once we understood where we came from, once we understood what happened, what we did, what other people did, how we can change that, we have to accept it. Because, like you said, it's not about glorifying it, but it's about it happened and it is the way, and we cannot change it anymore because it is in the past. And once you have this clarity and once you were able to accept it, and yeah, it's gonna hurt, and emotions are important and feelings are important, and you have to embrace them, but they don't have to dictate your life.
Okay, so I have a question here.
Yes.
So essentially, when you're reflecting on your past, especially a painful past, then isn't it really hard to evaluate it without a biased perspective towards it? Like nobody would obviously accept that they are wrong, and even coming to that point is really hard for a lot of people. So where does your mental biases play a role in this model?
So obviously mental biases always play a role. I don't think it makes sense to deny them. I do think that through practice of self-awareness, and that where courses come in, that where personal coaching comes in, that you have to accept that you mess up sometimes. Like, we are not gods. Like, we are humans. We do make mistakes, right? And I do think that is kind of the prerequisite of change, that we accept that some things weren't good. And whether that is all us or all somebody else, I don't think this black and white thinking is not good. But like to see, hey, it turned out to be bad, and there are 1 or 2 things that I could have done differently. And so like, yeah, the bias is there, and I do think the bias will always be there. The question is just, how much room do you give to this bias? And there, like I said, there are practices that you can use for self-reflection. You can ask other people if you feel like it. If you want to expose yourself, like if you have friends who you can trust that are honest with you, then you can ask your friends. And so I think there are ways to lower this bias. But I
Okay.
think also the bias is good, because if you think about your convictions and your values and you weren't biased towards them, then they were useless. Like, they wouldn't have any value. You know what I mean?
No, that makes
So you
sense.
need this
Yeah.
bias
If
kind of.
there's a belief, then you have to kind of be in that biased state. But essentially, when you're reflecting on your past, there are two types of people. One person is like, oh, the other person was to blame for everything. And there is the other type of person who always takes the blame, irrelevant of the fact that how much they had to contribute to this. So when we are seeing such cases of extreme, then how does someone effectively self-reflect? Like, do you have a process for self-reflection that you use? Some questions that you ask?
Definitely. I think it all comes down to where they're coming from, and that's why the past bit is so important. So if someone is always taking the blame, where does it come from? Like, is it like from their childhood? Is it from like self-perception? Like, how is their view of themselves? Or if somebody always puts the blame on others, then it's just quite easy, because you cannot coach the person that is not in the room, right? So
Yeah.
you can only, as me as a coach, I can only work with the person who does the coaching with me, and I cannot coach the person who is supposedly to blame, right? And so we kind of have to be like, even if the other person is wrong, and like, let's just, so I do think it is very important to meet the people where they're at. So if we were talking and you were like blaming other people, and I would just say, no, that's not true, like, you're wrong, then we couldn't develop, right? So I
Yeah.
kind of have to be like, okay, let's assume that everybody else is doing wrong and you're the only one doing right.
Okay.
And then the question is, can you control the others? And the answer is no. So then it's like, okay, even if you do everything right, what can you change in your behavior to reach your goal, whatever that goal is, right? And so I think those are two very important frameworks. First of all, see, okay, where do those biases come from, and how can we either soften them or like change them a little bit? And the second one is, you can only work on yourself. Like, you cannot change other people, you can only change yourself. So even if you were the only person right, which is very unlikely generally, then like, what can you change about your behavior that serves you to bring you closer to your goal? I think those are the two most important things when it comes to personal biases and accountability.
I think holding yourself accountable is very important, especially in this era where it's just a blame game constantly.
Yeah.
And do you find it easier to write and reflect, or do you find it helpful to talk to someone, or what method do you use for self reflection, if there's any specific one?
So I do think that both have value.
Okay.
So I do think for most people, except when you're like very introverted or very shy or very insecure about yourself, but if you're not, then talking is very, very powerful. If you have someone, because it builds human connection, it can give you feedback, it can give you advice, you know, like, it is more than just putting stuff onto paper. But where conversation falls short is the accountability part, in a sense that, you know, the entire he said, she said, you know, like, you forget what you said, or like, it is not on paper, it is not tangible, you know? So I do think if you are someone who loves to talk, and there are many people out there who love to talk, then having a first conversation is super important. And then in the end, giving yourself like 5 minutes to like brain dump onto a paper, because in 2 months' time, you're not going to remember what the conversation was exactly. Like, what words did you use? What issues did you talk about? Like, you won't remember anymore. And then you just have a piece of paper and you have everything on there. On the other hand, if you'd rather write, I do think it makes sense to write down. It doesn't have to be like a diary or like a journal. You can just brain dump every once in a while and just write it down there. And then I do think to develop all by yourself is very, very difficult. So if you don't seek the conversation, it will be very, very hard to develop yourself because you're missing some perspectives, right? And so I do think it's not like an either or thing. It's more like, what do you prefer? Where are you better at? What makes you feel better? And then finding a good balance to keep this going.
Okay. So like, what clarity have you attained after reflecting on your past relationship? Because I'm assuming that a divorce at such a young age would have been really, really painful. So what clarity were you able to achieve with that experience?
I mean, there are many things, I guess, but it comes from a point of like self-perception. For example, like it doesn't really help me in my next relationship, but it helps me in my self-view, is that I got to know my ex-wife when I was 15. We got married with 21 and we got divorced with 22. So it was like basically my entire life as like a young adult I spent with this one person. And like, I mean, I was in a relationship with her, I loved her, and at the same time I wasn't really popular outside of that relationship or outside of that friend circle. Like in school or something, I wasn't like a popular kid. So personally, I believed that people don't find me attractive. Like I found myself attractive, like I was like, yeah, I'm decently looking, like, you know, like it's fine, but I didn't feel like other people see me that way. And so after the divorce, I had to go dating. So I had to get to know new people on like a personal level. I had to figure out, okay, what do I find attractive, what not? And so my self-perception and what other people showed me is that I was actually, other people see me as attractive, and it helped me with my confidence, it helped me with my view of myself, because I got into a situation where other people showed me that my self-perception was not true actually, and that there are people out there who find me attractive. And so it's not a major revelation, but for me it was like a good confidence boost.
No, I mean, that makes sense, because I think a couple of months back we had also had another guest, and he was conventionally good looking, but inside he always sort of self-sabotaged and he never found himself as enough. But once you let the world decide and give you that valuable acceptance, I think it's important. Do you believe in internal validation or external validation?
I mean, external validation is very important in a sense that if you give external validation, if you put somebody else on a pedestal or if you lift them up, then it doesn't just help them, it also helps you. I was recording a podcast episode and the guy was not even talking about me, but he said, the one thing that was so good, and just because he said good, I had to smile. You know, like it's just like this mirroring of positive things and this compounding impact of like when something is good and it gets shown as good, and if there's like, so I think this external validation is very, very important when it comes to giving it. Mm-hmm. But you cannot depend on receiving it, you know? Like, depending on where you are on your journey, you won't get that external validation. Let's say you're starting your own business and you are at the beginning. It's more likely than not that people around you will say you will fail. Mm-hmm. They will not say, hey, it's amazing that you're doing this. And so you kind of have to rely on yourself. But if you are able to give external validation to others, first of all, it's going to be more likely that you get it back. And this is like super motivating. It's like super compounding and improving your life and everybody's life. So if you are the change that you want to see in the world, like if you are positive to others, they will give it back to you. And also, if somebody gives you external validation, you also kind of have to be critical about it, you know, like, because you don't know their motives, you don't know why they're saying it. So I do think it's a double-edged sword, but to dismiss any of them, I think would be wrong. I think we need both of them. The question is just how often do we get it, how reliant are we on it, and how self-sufficient are we? And it's a thin line between I don't need anyone, I'm by myself and I do everything by myself and I'm the greatest and whatever. This is obviously bad. And on the other side, I need other people to tell me how good I am because I don't believe in myself. And this is like the other bad thing, right? And we kind of have to find a line in the middle.
Makes sense. So be a cheerleader to others and also be a cheerleader to yourself.
Exactly.
That makes sense. So now that we have discussed about the past, let's also dive into the present.
Yeah.
Or is there something else left in the past?
No, I think the past we covered quite clearly, and obviously we can go deeper and deeper and deeper, but we don't have the time today. So if anybody has any questions, either comments or reaching out or whatever way
drop
possible.
your socials so they can directly reach out to you.
Exactly. Yeah, or also comment on your YouTube video. So the present is like the point that connects everything, because if you have like the action of evaluating, the action of accepting, it will all happen in the present, right? Like it will not have happened in the past, but you have to do it now. And so what I do think is important is that we stay in the present and that we give ourselves the chance to change the past, in a sense that if we find out why we were the way we were in the past, it doesn't have to be that we have to stay that way, you know? So first of all, every action that you take, and I have a more behavioral approach, so it's about what you do. It happens in the present. And especially when we talk about the past, like I said, the past doesn't define you, it just shows you where you come from and what place you might want to leave. And if we look from the present and the future, still the actions you have to perform in the present. And second of all, let's say I have a picture in my mind, I want to become a cricket player, right? Like I want to be a professional cricket player. And I decide that for myself and I start practicing, and then I feel like, okay, this doesn't make me happy. Should I stay on this path because I decided this is supposed to be my future? Or am I in the present and I'm seeing, okay, this is not what I really want, and I can adjust my path? So I think those are the two things why the present is so important. First of all, because you have to do everything in the present. And second of all, because we're living in the present and we want to like stick to a vision that is not truly ours, or we don't want to, you know, do something that doesn't align with our values. And when we figure that out, we should be able to adjust within the present, you know. That's why the present is so important in this piece.
Fine. And where does motivation play a role? Because say you had a traumatic past and then taking action becomes way harder, right? Like after a divorce, going for a date is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. So where does that push come from?
It is very difficult, and I do think that motivation comes from emotions. So if you get angry, if you get frustrated, if you get sad, if you get happy, you know, these are the things that really move you. Like logically you can understand, okay, I'm divorced now, I'm single now, I want to have a relationship again, so I should go out and date. Like that's logically. But most likely you're not going to do that because there's so much baggage, or there's so many things that keep you back. But when you feel alone and you feel sad or you feel like frustrated, that gives you the opportunity to act. And I do think, especially when we think about, okay, when is a good time to start or how do we get there? It's very difficult for an outside person to support because they are not going through what you are going through.
Yes.
And on the other hand, I think having a good social life is very helpful. So to be like, hey, I don't have to go out by myself, but I can go out with friends. You know, to have someone that you don't have to overcome all your challenges by yourself, but you have a reliable social group that you can do things with is very important. And then I think what I also love is this concept of baby steps, because right now we see baby steps often as like small steps that will gradually bring progress and that are easy to make, you know, and we should focus on that.
Yes.
And what I heard and what I really, really loved was that baby steps are actually the most courageous steps ever, because a baby was crawling, it never walked before, and now it starts to walk, and now it starts to maybe lose the grip to the parent, and it starts to walk by itself, but still with the trust that the parent will catch it when it falls. So like baby steps, yeah, they're small, but they're the most courageous thing that you can do. Because if we go back to the relationship example, you might feel like you've lost everything. And you have to take the next baby step full of courage, that you don't know where it leads, you don't know how it's going to be received, and you don't know how people are going to treat you, but you have to make this step. It's going to be a small step, but it's going to be taking a lot of courage. So to reframe those baby steps into something heroic, I love, like this is like the best picture, like the best reframe I've had in a while now, that I really love to come back to, because that's basically what it is. Make a task as small as possible, try to do it, and try to have like a social group around you that supports you and that will like catch you if you fall. And I do think if you can manage that, then this is like the best thing you can do. And obviously we do have many people who don't have the social background or like the support that they would need for that. And then it gets a lot more difficult. But I don't think, or like I do think that having the courage to get out there again, regardless of what happened in the past, that is the most important thing to foster and to keep.
Thank you for sharing that reframe. Like, honestly, for a long time in my life also, I thought that baby steps are just these small steps you take, it compounds over time. But honestly, that first step requires the most courage. It gets easier over time, definitely. But yeah, this is very important to understand. And how did you even figure this out? This is actually a big reshift, like, if you think about it. Was there a particular instance that happened and you're like, oh, wait a minute, here is where I had to use the most courage?
So I do think that generally I haven't thought of anything new. Like all my ideas have been here before. I mean, there has been philosophy around for thousands of years. So I do think that most things have been thought of before. And especially with the baby steps, it comes down to like the basic things, you know, when you have shared your life with someone for 8 years and then you do everything by yourself again, then everything is hard. And then you might get to a point where you don't do anything and it's also hard because you resent yourself or you're like not doing the things that you actually want to do or that make you happy. And then like, so you have like this thing of like, you don't know what to do. And to then just be able to get some routine in there, just to get some repetitive action, you know, maybe having the same breakfast or going for a walk or like, you know, having these kind of things, going outside, being seen by the world. So everybody has their own challenge, but to do that consistently is so hard, but it's so necessary because the alternative of doing nothing is way worse. And so to get the courage to do those things, those little things, that's kind of where the courage part came in, where I was like, yeah, I'm only making small progress, but it's like very hard earned progress. So, sorry.
When the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change, that's when we start to change.
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah? Okay. Another question I had when it comes to the present is what are some practices that we can do to stay there? Because most people live in the future or in the past. Like personally, I live in the future a lot. I barely appreciate the present. So how do you appreciate the present more?
That's a good question. And I think it comes down to the focus on yourself. Mm-hmm. And it is important to note that that is not supposed to be like a egotistical way. So it's not a focus about how great you are or like why you're the best or like just about me, but it's a focus about what happened in the past happened in the past and you cannot really change it. And what happens in the future will happen in the future and you cannot predict it or you cannot do anything about it, right? So to think about, okay, what can you really control? Like your thoughts, your actions, your judgments, and everything within you, basically, you can control. So if you feel like you need some help there, and that is basically every time you feel like those ideas about the future and what you think about the future is keeping you like daydreaming or keeping you from doing the right things in the present, I think then you would need some kind of reflection technique or meditation or whatever you like to use to reflect on, okay, what is important now, what I have to do now. You know, like these are the kind of steps where I think it is important to be aware of the past and the future, but actually living you are in the present. And that's why you need to make sure that you have some kind of systems in place that will keep you in the present. And while daydreaming is fine, and while reflection is important, I do think that living in the present is the most important part.
Okay. So not obsessing over the future or the past, because at the end of the day, you can never predict it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly.
Because I've noticed a pattern with me and a lot of people, is a lot of ambitious people, they practice delayed gratification. And when you're kind of depriving yourself of the pleasures in the present for the pleasures in the future, it becomes very hard not to think about the future. So what are your thoughts on delayed gratification?
I do think it's an important skill, and where this important comes from is that you do not have the control of when this gratification comes, you know? And so I'm a huge fan of Stoic philosophy. So like Marcus Aurelius or Seneca. And what they're saying is basically, if you're always longing after more, like if you always want some kind of gratification, then you will never be wealthy. Like you could possess the world, but you would never be wealthy. And the actual way to be wealthy is to not want anything. And obviously this is like super, super hard. Like we want stuff, right? I think that's natural. And I do think it's like very extreme, and I don't know whether many people would ever achieve a space where they would not want anything. But I think if you take this underlying principle of, if you are happy with what you have right now, then you already have resilience when it comes to delayed gratification, because then you're already happy. And if you're going to get something in the future, it's amazing, right? Like you're going to be happy then too, but you're also happy with what you have right now. And so I try to practice just like general contentment and like being happy with the situation that you're in right now, and everything that comes in the future is going to be amazing. And I do think, yeah, like I just view it from a different lens, maybe not in a sense that we have to artificially delay our gratification, but we just have to be fine with what we have.
But why do you think as a society we worship extremes? Like if you see David Goggins, in his book he had written that there was a point where he was pissing blood. That is obviously not safe for anyone to actually recreate. And Alex Hermosi, he's like, work 100 hours a week or whatever. Why do you think as a society we do that? We worship extremes.
I mean, I do think that most of the people want to be recognized in a way. Like, okay, you're living in a society, so you're a social being and you want to be noticed. Like, if you're in a group of people, like work or school, and nobody cares about you, you will probably feel really bad, right? There are different ways of getting attention, but one of them is being exceptional, if you want to call it that way. And so I do think it just comes from the basic human desire to be recognized in a way. And I just think that there are many ways to be recognized, and that many people mistake the fame as like the best way of recognition. And what I do think is like an alternative would be being recognized by your peers. So like family, friends, co-workers. If you can be recognized in those kind of circles, it's probably way more meaningful and way more fulfilling than having 3 million followers on
Yeah.
social media, you know? So I do think there's like quantity and quality, and I mean, both are valid, and you need a little bit of both. And yeah, I just think that it comes from like this desire to be recognized, and maybe like a little bit of a, I don't want to say wrong, a little bit of a faulty idea of what recognition should look like or what makes you actually happy.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, just diving into this a bit deeper, how can someone be successful without taking an extreme route? Like according to you?
I think it's a very simple question, a very simple answer, because you define your success.
That makes sense.
Nobody else can define it for you, because you decide when you're successful. And I mean, obviously, if you decide that you're only successful if you have like $1 billion, then you have to be extreme, because that is an extreme. But if you decide to be successful with having a family, having a good circle of friends, doing what you love, then I don't think you need to be extreme to achieve that.
That makes sense. Yeah. So now let's dive into the future aspect of things.
Exactly. The reason why the future is so important is because if we are just going with the flow, you know, like drifting in the wind, we don't have a goal. We also cannot really have a purpose. And like your question was a perfect transition, basically. We have to define our purpose. We have to define what is success for us. We have to define our future. And so this imagination, like this planning of what do we want to do, how do we want to get there, why is it important to us? These are so important questions because they give our lives meaning, you know? And only if we have true meaning, and only if we feel the purpose, we feel like we even want to pursue that. Because if it's just like, if I say I want to have $1 billion, but there's no reason why I want that, then it's very likely that I won't achieve it. So we have to imagine it, and we have to be curious about what is even possible. And that's where the perspective comes in again. Because, for example, if I have never talked, like I grow up, I go to school, I go to uni, I start my work at corporate, and I've never talked to an entrepreneur, I've never talked to a business owner, then I most likely will not even consider opening a business myself.
Yeah.
Because I don't have this perspective. I don't have the knowledge that it is possible and why it could be a good thing to do. And the same thing with like in your personal life. If you have never left your country and you've never talked to someone who left your country, then how would you know that learning something about a new culture in a different country is enriching?
True.
And
But
so yeah, please.
No, continue. Sorry for interrupting.
So I think this perspective comes in when you're thinking about, okay, you have to be curious to find out new perspectives and to imagine what would even be possible, right? And if we then have like a picture of, we really want to get there, we really want to have a family with a couple of children, we really want to have our own business, we really want to be CEO of like a company, we really want to maybe travel more, you know, like once we generate this image, we also have to take the action and do the things, you know. We have to do the things that we want to do. Talking about it won't get us closer. Like reading about it. Alex Hormozy said it so nicely. He said, if you're reading a book, if you're learning something new, but your behavior doesn't change, you actually haven't learned anything. And so we need to put it into action to actually give us a chance to reach our future.
Yeah. And when it comes to the future, one thing I've observed is while planning the future, your motivation has to be intrinsic. Like you can't do it because other people think you should do it. Like if you're a fat person and other people are just making fun of you, but you don't really care about it, you'll never actually lose the weight. Or that I think a good example for this would be buying a Lamborghini. If you don't actually like cars, but you're just buying that car for social validation, then it's highly unlikely that you will ever achieve it. And even if you achieve it, it's highly unlikely that you'll ever enjoy that future.
Exactly. And I think one thing that's very strong when you paint this picture of like it has to be intrinsic, it has to come from within you, is
Yeah.
that you have to know about your past and your present to even be able to know your values, your what is important to you, like what you want to do, what you're willing to sacrifice, like all these things you only will find in the past and the present to then make the decision what the future will look like.
Is it also important, equally important in fact, to forgive yourself for not achieving that future? Like in India, we have this competitive exam called JEE. So over here, 10 lakh people write this exam to get into this prestigious college called IIT. And out of that, only I think 10,000 people make it. And the ones who don't make it, who have also painted this picture and built a future for them, most of them commit suicide because they can't forgive themselves for not achieving that future. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that, first of all, it's the first time hearing of that, like at least in that context of India or like this school. I don't know anything about how it is in Germany, like if people don't get into like any prestigious school or something like that. But obviously this is horrible, like from a humanitarian standpoint, like that that people feel that way. And I do think that it's the same point we discussed right now, that to get there is first of all not necessarily like an intrinsic motivation, because it feels like, when you tell me the story, it feels like it's more like a society pressure kind of thing, that it is expected of you to get to this university. And the second part is that you have to know in the first place that only so many people can get accepted by the university, right?
Yeah.
Like, it will never come to the point where it's like 100% acceptance rate. So there will always people who won't make it. And I think an important framework is to be rigorous with your goal, but flexible with the path. So I do know that, there's this one university that is like the most important university for you guys. And the question is, okay, could you achieve the same job or the same life if you went to a different university, right?
Yeah.
And
That makes sense.
so like, I mean, to be honest, there I'm not too deep in the culture, so I do not know exactly how to approach that topic. But I do think that either being more flexible in your path, accepting that there will never be a 100% acceptance rate, and really questioning, is this really what I want, or is it what I was made to believe that is important?
True. That makes sense. And my final question for you is, what is the future you would like to build?
That is an amazing question. And thank you that I get to talk about it. So obviously I have like a long-term future that I would really, really love that I could create, in a sense, which is, first of all, reaching as many young people as possible to help them develop those kind of skills to deal with challenges in their life, to be less overwhelmed, to create the opportunity that they like, to understand where they're coming from, to be able to live in the present, like all the things that we just discussed. I would love for as many people as possible to get to this stage, right? And the second evolution of that is not just to talk to young adults or to coach young adults, but to talk to parents, Like, I needed 5 years right now to overcome like divorce and challenging career changes and childhood trauma, and like there's so many things that I spent 5 years to overcome, which is a long time. In 5 years you could achieve a lot, and I wish to save other people the time and the effort that I had to put in, as well as then when it comes to parents, if you can teach your child to be that resilient, to have that understanding of themselves, then they won't need me when they're young adults, because they've already learned it as a child. So that will be like the evolution of that. And then the third part is, I would love to not only have, online one-on-one coaching sessions or webinars or something like that, but I would love to have like local communities of like-minded people that can meet, and sometimes you just need a hug.
Yes.
Talking about it is nice, and having like an online session and connecting with people online is amazing, but sometimes you need this physical connection with people, and I would love to be able to provide that for people who are struggling and people who want to grow together. I think these are the three most important things that I want to achieve in the future.
That is a wonderful vision, and I really pray to God that you do achieve it and you achieve it soon, because especially this generation, we do need this. There is just so much of pressure that has built upon us, especially because of the state of the economy and how AI is rapidly replacing us, and there's so many problems. And yeah, sometimes we do need a hug. And this has been a really wonderful conversation with you, Simon, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come here and share your Perspective Pentagon. If you don't mind, I would love to also put the image of this in the description. Is that fine with you? So that people can refer to it? Yeah. Okay, so thank you for your time. And for the people who are watching this podcast, I hope you learned something new. And any final thoughts, Simon, before we end?
Thank you so much for the invitation and for the opportunity to have this conversation. And yeah, I feel like it's most important that you know, as like someone who watches this, you're not alone with anything that you go through. And if you don't have anyone to reach out to, at least reach out to me. Like, I'm happy to hear your story. I'm happy to be there for you. And I won't be able to fix anything, and I don't offer therapy or anything like that. But I think to have the courage to share is the first step to then be able to change things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So fine. Take care, Simon, and have a good morning.
Thank you so much.